I wasn't supposed to hear anything. That's what keeps echoing in my head. I wasn't supposed to be awake, I wasn't supposed to understand what she whispered, and I definitely wasn't supposed to become the person holding a secret that could shatter my brother's entire life. But once you hear something like that, you can't unhear it. You can't pretend you're sleeping anymore. You can't go back to being the sibling who smiles at holiday dinners while pretending everything is fine. It happened late at night in the guest room at their house, after a long family weekend that was supposed to be peaceful. I heard her walk into the room, thinking I was asleep. I heard her crying softly, and then I heard the confession she never meant for anyone else to know. She said his name. She said the things she did. She said she didn't know how to live with herself. I froze, unable to move, unable to breathe. And from that moment on, my entire relationship with both of them changed. Because when someone hands you the truth by accident, you have to decide what to do with it, and whether telling it makes you the villain or the only honest person in the room. When I finally told my brother what his wife confessed that night, everything exploded in ways I didn't expect. He accused me of lying, then of trying to ruin his marriage, then of being jealous of the life he built. He said I misheard, misunderstood, twisted the situation, but I didn't. I know what I heard. I know what she admitted, and I know why she said it when she thought I was asleep, because the truth is easier to say when you believe no one is listening, but someone was. Me. And now I'm stuck between two versions of myself, the sibling who stayed loyal to family, or the one who spoke up when silence felt like betrayal. Before I dive into everything that happened, before and after that night, make sure you subscribe to the Conflict Corner. This channel is where real people face the messy, uncomfortable truths that families try to hide. And trust me, you don't want to miss how this story unfolds, because what she confessed wasn't just shocking, it was something that changed all of our lives in ways none of us saw coming. I didn't tell him right away. People assume I ran straight to my brother the moment his wife whispered her confession, but that's not how it happened. The truth sat in my chest like a stone for days, then weeks, pressing harder every time I saw them together. I kept convincing myself I misheard, that I was half asleep, that exhaustion made me imagine the trembling in her voice. But replaying it didn't help, because every detail was still perfectly clear, every word etched into my memory with the kind of sharpness you don't get from dreams. The night it happened, I was staying over at their house because my car broke down. They set up the guest room for me. We laughed, we ate dinner, everything felt normal. But around 2 a.m, 2 long, quiet hours after everyone went to bed, I heard footsteps. Light ones, hesitant. I kept my eyes closed at first. I assumed she just needed something from the closet, or maybe she was grabbing a blanket. But then she sat on the edge of the bed, thinking I was asleep, and her breathing, it wasn't normal. It was uneven, shaky, like she had been crying for a long time, but was trying to keep the sound low. I stayed still, thinking she'd leave. Instead, she whispered his name, my brother's name, with a kind of guilt that felt thick enough to touch. Then she whispered, "I don't know how to tell you. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to live with what I did." My heart slammed against my ribs. She wasn't talking to me, but she wasn't talking to him either. She was talking to the version of him she imagined in her mind, the one she wanted forgiveness from without the risk of being rejected. And then came the confession, the thing she admitted, the thing she didn't know I heard. Even now, thinking about it makes my stomach twist. I didn't react, I didn't move, I didn't even breathe too loudly. I just lay there, pretending to be asleep, while my entire understanding of their marriage changed in an instant. When she finally left the room, the silence felt different. Not peaceful, but dangerous, like the quiet after a storm that hasn't finished breaking things yet. The next morning, she acted normal, too normal. She made breakfast, she joked with my brother, she asked me how I slept. I looked at her face, calm, composed, smiling, and I wondered how someone could carry a truth that heavy and still butter toast like nothing happened. My brother, of course, noticed nothing. He has never been good at reading small signals, especially emotional ones. He's always been the type who believes people are exactly who they present themselves to be. When I looked at him that morning, I saw a man living in a different reality from the one I had stepped into. And that's when the stone in my chest formed, because I suddenly knew something he didn't, something that could destroy him, something that shouldn't belong to me. I tried to forget. I really did. For about a week, I convinced myself it wasn't my place to say anything. Their marriage was theirs, not mine. I had no right to interfere. But every time I saw them, every time my brother texted me, every time my phone buzzed with a picture of their weekend plans, the truth twisted tighter. I started sleeping poorly. I stopped answering their calls. My brother noticed. He kept asking if he had done something wrong. He kept apologizing for things he didn't even understand. His wife, meanwhile, stayed quiet. She never brought up that night, never hinted she knew she had said anything out loud, and that silence made everything worse. Because if she had confessed to him afterward, maybe I could have let it go, but she hadn't. She was living as if the truth didn't exist, and he was loving her like nothing was wrong. The breaking point came during a family dinner about 3 weeks later. We were all sitting at my mother's table, laughing about something my uncle said, when my brother leaned close to his wife and kissed her forehead. It was such a small gesture, but her reaction wasn't small. She froze for half a second, just half a second, but I saw it. The guilt surged through her expression so fast I don't think anyone else noticed, but I did, because I was looking for it, and that one moment told me everything I needed to know. She hadn't told him. She had no intention of telling him. And my silence wasn't protecting anyone. It was helping her lie. I barely ate after that. My fork sat on my plate untouched while everyone else kept talking. My brother eventually nudged me with his foot under the table and whispered, "You okay?" I forced a smile. Lied. Told him I was tired. But I wasn't tired. I was drowning. That night, driving home, I pulled over into a parking lot and just sat there in the dark, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The truth felt too big for one person to carry. I kept replaying her whisper, the confession, the guilt in her voice, the way she said she didn't know how to live with herself. And then I asked myself the question I had been avoiding. If he found out later, and he realized I knew, would he ever forgive me for staying silent? The answer hit me like cold water. No, he wouldn't, and he'd be right not to. The next day, I asked him to meet me at a cafe near his house. He arrived smiling, unaware of the emotional wreckage I was about to hand him. When I told him I needed to talk about something serious, the smile faded, but he stayed calm. He always trusts me. That's what made it worse. I didn't start with details. I didn't start with the confession. I started with the simplest truth. Your wife came into my room the night I stayed over. She didn't know I was awake. He frowned, confused. Okay, and? I swallowed hard. She said something she thought I didn't hear. His expression tightened. Not with suspicion, but with concern. Is she okay? Was she upset? Yes, I whispered. She was crying. The worry in his face deepened. He still didn't see where this was going. I wished he never had to. What did she say? He asked. I told him, word for word. Every whisper, every tremble, every piece of the confession she thought was safe in the dark. At first he didn't react. He just stared at me like his mind refused to process the information. Then he said, "No, she wouldn't. She didn't. Are you sure?" I nodded, slowly, firmly. I didn't mishear. I didn't misunderstand. His breathing grew unsteady. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I wanted to say I was trying to protect him. I wanted to say I didn't want to ruin anything, but the truth was messier. Because I didn't know if telling you made me the villain. He leaned back, eyes glossy, jaw clenched. And now? I met his gaze. Now I think not telling you would have made me worse. He didn't speak for a long time after I told him. He just sat there, staring at his hands like he didn't recognize them anymore. His wedding ring caught the light from the window, and for a moment he twisted it slowly, like he wasn't sure it still belonged on his finger. When he finally looked up at me, his face wasn't angry. It wasn't even shocked. It was something far worse. Broken. I need to hear it again, he said, his voice barely holding together. So I told him again. I repeated every word she whispered that night, every tremble in her voice, every piece of guilt she spilled into the darkness when she thought no one was awake. Each sentence seemed to crush him a little more. When I finished, he covered his face with both hands and leaned forward, elbows on the table, breathing like he'd just run miles. She never said anything, he whispered. Not once. Not even a hint. His voice cracked. Watching him fall apart made something inside me twist with guilt, even though I knew I wasn't the one who caused this. Still, I felt like the messenger dragging a storm behind me. I'm sorry, I said quietly. I didn't want to hurt you. He shook his head. You didn't hurt me. She did. But the way he said it didn't sound convincing, not even to himself, because part of him still didn't want to believe it. Part of him was searching for another explanation, some version where she wasn't guilty and I wasn't telling the truth. He needed the world to make sense again, and it didn't. Not anymore. What exactly did she say? He asked suddenly, like repeating the details might change them. I told him again. He winced like every word was a hit he didn't see coming. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled with something between denial and desperation. She loves me. She wouldn't... He couldn't finish. His throat closed around the sentence. I leaned back, unsure of what to say. I didn't want to push. I didn't want to influence his thoughts. My only job was to tell the truth, not to decide what he did with it. He wiped his face and stood abruptly. I need to talk to her. My stomach tightened. Right now? Right now, he said, grabbing his keys. I followed him outside, not because he asked, but because something told me this conversation wasn't going to be simple or calm. When we pulled into his driveway, I felt something cold settle in my chest. His wife was outside watering the plants, completely unaware of the emotional earthquake heading straight for her. She smiled when she saw us, waving at me first. It made everything worse. My brother stepped out of the car and said her name, quietly but firmly. She turned toward him, expression softening. "Hey," she said. "I didn't know you two were meeting up today." He didn't respond. He just stared at her with eyes that no longer belonged to a man in love, but to someone who had just lost his bearings. Her smile faltered. "What's wrong?" she asked. Still nothing. He didn't yell, didn't accuse. He just walked past her and opened the front door. She followed slowly, confused, and I stayed behind for a moment, giving them space. When I finally stepped inside, their voices were coming from the living room, low, tense, barely controlled. "What did you tell him?" she asked, panic rising. "I didn't tell him anything," he said. "You did." Her breath hitched. "What?" "That night," he said. "When you thought he was asleep, the things you whispered." The room went still, completely still. She didn't deny it. She didn't gasp. She didn't look confused. She froze, and that freeze told me more than any confession could. Her eyes flicked toward me, then back to him, calculating the damage. "You told him?" she whispered to me, voice shaking. I nodded. He deserved to know. She stared at the floor, shoulders collapsing inward like the truth had finally caught up to her. My brother stepped closer, his voice cracking. "Is it true?" She didn't answer, and that was the answer. He pressed his hands against his face again, but this time the sound that came out of him wasn't shock. It was betrayal, deep and personal. "Why?" he whispered. She finally sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "I didn't know what to do," she sobbed. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to lose everything." "So you said it to my brother instead," he snapped, and for the first time his voice rose, trembling with the force of everything he had held back. "You confessed to the wrong person." She shook her head, crying harder. "No, I wasn't confessing. I was talking to myself. I didn't know he was awake. I didn't think anyone would ever hear. But someone did," he said. "Someone heard the truth." She covered her face again. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." My brother backed away like the room itself had become dangerous. "Sorry doesn't fix anything," he said. "Not this." She looked up at him, eyes swollen, voice trembling. "Please, let me explain." "Explain what?" he said. "Explain how you lied to me every day since then. Explain why you acted like everything was fine while I cooked for you, planned our future with you, trusted you." She sobbed into her hands again. I stood quietly near the doorway, feeling more like an intruder than I ever had in my life. I wished I could disappear, wished this wasn't happening because of something I overheard, but it wasn't happening because of me. It was happening because of her actions, and because the truth always finds a way out one way or another. My brother paced, hands shaking. "How long were you going to keep this from me?" She didn't answer. He stared at her, eyes full of something I had never seen from him. Clarity. "We're going to take time apart," he said finally. She dropped her hands, eyes wide. "No, please, don't. I need space," he said, voice breaking. "I need to think. I need to breathe without wondering what else I don't know." She grabbed his arm, desperate. "Please, don't go." He gently pulled away. "You already left," he whispered. "You just didn't walk out the door." Without another word, he turned and walked out of the house. I followed him silently, leaving her collapsed on the couch, shaking with sobs that came too late. When we got to the car, he didn't start it. He just sat there, staring ahead, breathing unevenly. "Did I do the right thing?" he asked. I didn't answer right away, because sometimes the truth doesn't feel like the right thing, even when it is. Finally, I said, "You did the honest thing." He closed his eyes. Tears slipped down his cheeks silently. And in that moment, I realized something. Telling the truth wasn't the hardest part. Living with it was. And this was only the beginning. He didn't go home that night. He didn't go to our mother's house either. Instead, he drove aimlessly for almost an hour before finally pulling into the parking lot of an old park we used to go to when we were kids. He turned off the engine, but didn't get out. He just sat there, staring at the empty playground illuminated by dim yellow lamps, gripping the steering wheel like letting go might make him collapse entirely. I stayed quiet beside him. Sometimes silence is the only thing strong enough to hold someone together when words can't. Eventually he whispered, "I don't know who she is anymore." I turned toward him, but his eyes remained fixed on the swings drifting gently in the wind. "I thought we were happy," he said. "I thought we were solid. I thought I knew everything about her." He exhaled shakily. "But she hid something this big, and she let me live in a lie every day since. People hide things out of fear," I said softly. "Fear of losing someone, fear of being judged, fear of themselves." He shook his head. "Fear doesn't excuse betrayal." His voice cracked on the last word. After a long silence, he finally asked the question I knew was coming. "Why did she confess it that night?" "Why then?" I swallowed. "Because she thought no one was listening. Because the truth is loudest when people think they're alone." He leaned back in the seat, closing his eyes like he wanted to disappear into the dark behind them. "I keep imagining her crying," he said quietly. "Imagining how scared she must have been to say those words." "She wasn't scared of losing you," I said gently. "She was scared of admitting who she had become." He opened his eyes and looked at me. "Do you think she ever intended to tell me?" I hesitated, but only for a moment. "No," I said. "I don't think she did." He nodded as if confirming something he already feared. I can't forgive something she never planned to reveal. He started the car again, but instead of driving home, he drove to my apartment. I offered him the couch, but he didn't sleep. I could hear him pacing the living room all night, the floor creaking softly under the weight of his thoughts. By morning, exhaustion had carved dark circles under his eyes. I'm going to talk to her again, he said. I need answers. I didn't go with him this time. This part wasn't mine. This part was between them. Still, I spent the next 2 hours sitting on my couch, staring at my phone, waiting for a message. Good news, bad news, anything. When it finally buzzed, the message was short. Can you come? Please. My stomach twisted. I drove to his house quickly, heart pounding the whole way. When I walked inside, they were sitting across from each other at the kitchen table. She looked devastated, eyes swollen, hands shaking. He looked not furious, not broken, but something in between. Something like acceptance mixed with sorrow. I told him everything, she said before I could ask. Not just what you heard, all of it. My brother nodded slowly. His voice was quiet but steady when he spoke. I asked her why she didn't tell me sooner, why she let me believe everything was fine. She wiped her eyes. Because I thought it would end us. Because I thought you'd leave. I'm not leaving, he said. Her eyes widened with a mix of hope and disbelief. You're not? I'm not leaving today, he clarified. But things won't go back to what they were. She nodded, tears falling again. I understand. I need time, he said. A lot of it. And I need honesty now. Real honesty. Not the kind that only shows up in the dark. She nodded again, her hands trembling as she reached for his. He let her, but only for a moment before gently pulling away. Then he turned to me. I don't blame you, he said softly. You did the right thing. Relief washed over me so suddenly it made me dizzy. But the next words he said were heavier. But I don't know how to look at either of you the same way again, she sobbed quietly. I stayed still, absorbing the weight of what he wasn't saying. The truth didn't end their marriage, but it changed its shape forever. After a long silence, he said, I need to step outside. He walked into the backyard, closing the door behind him. She stared at the table, tears dripping onto her hands. I ruined everything, she whispered. No, I said softly, surprising myself. The truth did, and the truth was always going to come out. She looked up at me with eyes full of regret. Do you hate me? I hesitated. I didn't want to lie. No, I said. I don't hate you, but I don't trust you either. She nodded slowly, accepting the words like they were the only ones she deserved. When my brother returned, something about him looked different, like a decision had settled somewhere deep inside him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't ask any more questions. He just said 3 quiet words that changed everything. We need space. She broke down, sobbing, begging him not to step back, not to distance himself. But he didn't waver. Space isn't punishment, he said. It's the only chance we have left to fix anything. She covered her mouth, crying harder. He stood, walked over to me, and placed his hand on my shoulder. Thank you, he whispered, for telling me, even though it hurt. And that's when I realized something important. I wasn't the villain, and I wasn't the hero either. I was just the person who refused to let a lie live longer than the truth. That night, he stayed with me again. He didn't cry. He didn't talk much. He just sat on my couch staring at the wall, breathing slowly, as if trying to relearn how to exist in a world where his marriage wasn't what he thought it was. At some point he whispered, almost to himself, I don't know if we'll make it. I didn't answer, because I didn't know either. The truth can save you or destroy you. Sometimes it does both. As he drifted into an uneasy sleep, I sat beside him and realized something else. I didn't regret telling him. Not anymore. The truth didn't break our family. The lie did. And now that the lie was gone, the rebuilding, whatever shape it took, was finally possible. The days that followed moved strangely. Some hours painfully slow, others slipping past without me noticing. My brother stayed with me most nights, sleeping on the couch even though I offered him the bed. He said the couch made him feel less settled, and that feeling somehow comforted him. He wasn't ready for comfort. He wasn't ready to sleep peacefully while his marriage trembled. I'd find him awake at random hours, staring at the ceiling or scrolling through old photos on his phone, looking for signs he should have seen earlier. Sometimes he'd ask me, do you think she ever loved me the way I loved her? I never had an answer, not one that wouldn't break him further. After a week, he finally decided he needed to go back to the house, not to stay, but to talk, to see what was left. I went with him, not inside, just to the driveway. He stood there for a minute before going in, breathing slowly like he was about to lift something heavy. When he walked inside, she was sitting on the couch waiting for him. Her eyes were swollen, but she wasn't crying. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept since the day everything came out. I'm glad you came, she said softly. My brother didn't sit. He stood leaning against the wall, arms crossed, as if sitting meant surrendering ground he wasn't ready to give. We need rules, he said. If we're going to figure out anything, there have to be boundaries. She nodded quickly, almost too quickly, as if afraid he'd change his mind. Anything, she said. Tell me what you need. He took a deep breath. First, he said, no more pretending, no more secrets. If there's anything else I don't know, anything, you tell me now. Her eyes widened with panic. "There's nothing else," she whispered. "I swear." He studied her for a long time, and for a moment I wondered if he believed her. I couldn't tell. Then he said, "Second, we're going to therapy. Together or not at all." She nodded again. "Yes, of course." "Third," he said quietly, "we're not sharing a bed. Not until I trust you again." The words hit her visibly. Her shoulders folded inward, and for a moment she looked like she might collapse, but she accepted it. "Okay," she whispered, "if that's what you need." "It is," he said firmly. A long silence followed, painful, thick. She finally spoke again. "Do you want to leave? Should I leave? What do you want me to do right now?" He hesitated, then said something that surprised me. "I don't want you to leave the house." She blinked rapidly. "You don't? If you leave now?" he said. "It feels like running, and I don't want our next decision to be made from fear." She nodded slowly. "I understand." They talked for almost an hour while I waited outside. When my brother finally stepped back out, he looked drained, but not shattered the way he was before. Something in him had shifted just a little, toward clarity. "How'd it go?" I asked quietly. He shrugged. "It wasn't closure," he said, "but it wasn't chaos either. Maybe that's enough for today." For a while, things moved in small steps. They started therapy, separate at first, then together. My brother spent some nights at the house, some nights at mine. Their conversations were awkward and raw, but genuine. She apologized, many times in many ways. And though apologies didn't erase what she did, they softened certain edges that once felt impossible to touch. But trust isn't rebuilt through apologies alone. And one night, after a long therapy session, my brother came to my apartment with a look I hadn't seen before, a mix of exhaustion, realization, and something close to peace. He sank onto my couch and said, "I finally asked her why she said it out loud." "And?" I asked. He rubbed his eyes. "She said she didn't know how to tell me the truth because she didn't know if the truth belonged to her or to the person she used to be. She said she felt like she became a version of herself she didn't recognize, and that admitting it meant admitting she had hurt me more deeply than she ever intended." I stayed quiet. He continued. "She said she whispered it because it was the only way she could say the words without facing the consequences." That landed harder than I expected. Confessing without confessing. Seeking relief without accountability. Whispering into the darkness because the darkness doesn't talk back. "Do you believe her?" I asked. He thought long before answering. "I believe she told the truth about how she felt," he said slowly. "But I don't know if that truth is enough to fix us." A few days later, something unexpected happened. She reached out to me. A text. Simple. "Can we talk? I owe you an apology too. I didn't know if I wanted to hear it, but I agreed to meet her at a nearby cafe." She arrived looking like she hadn't taken a real breath in weeks. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrapped them around her cup. "Thank you for meeting me," she said softly. I nodded, but didn't say anything. She inhaled slowly. "I need to say this clearly. I'm sorry for dragging you into something that wasn't yours. You didn't deserve that burden. You shouldn't have put me in that position," I said. "I know," she whispered. "I was weak, scared, wrong." "Why did you say it that night?" I asked, still needing the clarity. She looked down at her hands. "Because I didn't know who I was anymore. I felt like I was living two lives. One where I was the wife he believed in, and another where I was the person who made the worst mistake of her life. Saying it out loud made it real, and real meant I couldn't hide from it." She looked up, tears forming. "But you heard me, and you weren't supposed to." "I know," I said, "but I did." She nodded, accepting it. "And I'm glad you told him. You did the right thing. I would have hidden forever if you hadn't." Hearing her admit that lifted something heavy off my chest, because it meant I wasn't the villain. I wasn't the destroyer of their marriage. I was the one who told the truth no one else had the courage to face. When we stood up to leave, she whispered, "Whatever happens between us in the future, thank you." 2 weeks later, my brother came to me with a calmness I hadn't seen in him since before all this happened. "We made a decision," he said. "We're staying together, but we're rebuilding from the ground up." I nodded. "Are you sure?" He smiled. Sad, but real. "Yeah, because now it's real. No secrets, no shadows, no whispers in the dark." Then he said something I'll never forget. "You didn't break us. You gave us a chance to start, honestly." For the first time since that night, the truth didn't feel like a weapon. It felt like a doorway, one they could choose to walk through together, and they did. Even after they decided to stay together, the air around my brother and his wife felt different, thicker somehow, like their marriage was a room that had finally been opened after years of being sealed shut. Dust didn't settle immediately. Fresh air didn't rush in all at once. It took time for the atmosphere to shift, for them to learn how to breathe next to each other again. I watched it happen slowly, like witnessing two people relearn a language they once spoke fluently. Some days they communicated better than before, honest, direct, stripped of the fear that once guided their silence. Other days were harder, filled with misunderstandings, frustration, and shadows of the truth that still lingered around them. My brother and I talked a lot during this time. Late-night conversations in my kitchen became our routine. Him at the table with a cup of tea he barely drank, me leaning against the counter listening to the pieces he was still trying to arrange in his mind. One night, he said something that stayed with me. Forgiveness isn't a moment, he said softly. It's 1,000 decisions you have to keep making every day. Some days I can make them, some days I can't. I nodded because I understood, not from experience, but from watching the way the truth reshapes people. You're doing the best you can, I said. He shook his head. Some days it doesn't feel like enough. I didn't argue. Sometimes silence tells the truth better than reassurance. A few weeks later, he invited me over for dinner. He said it casually, like it was normal, but the tension in his voice betrayed him. I knew why he invited me. This was their way of showing me something, that they were trying, that I wasn't the enemy, that we could all sit at the same table again without breaking. When I arrived, she greeted me at the door with a smile that didn't feel forced. Her eyes still held guilt, but there was something new there too, gratitude maybe, or understanding. She cooked a meal, and my brother set the table, and for a moment, everything felt almost like before. Almost. During dinner, she looked at me and said, "I know it was hard for you too." I froze. My brother glanced at her, surprised by her openness. She continued, "You carried something that wasn't yours to carry. You heard something you weren't meant to hear. You held a truth that terrified me." She paused, her voice trembling slightly. "Thank you for not using it against me. Thank you for giving us a chance to rebuild rather than tearing us apart." I didn't know what to say. For so long I had felt like the accidental detonator, the person who dropped the truth into their lives like a lit match into dry grass. Hearing her acknowledge my role without bitterness felt like a small thread stitching something back together. "I just did what felt right," I said quietly. She nodded. "Sometimes doing the right thing ruins everything first." Her honesty caught me off guard. My brother reached for her hand, not tightly, not with certainty, but with a kind of gentle resolve that made me realize how much they were both trying. After dinner, I stepped outside for some air while they cleaned up. The night was cool, and the silence of their street felt like a relief after everything we'd lived through. When my brother joined me outside, he stood next to me without speaking for a long time. Then he said, "You know, I used to think love meant never hurting someone." I looked at him. "And now?" He exhaled. "Now I think it means loving them even after you've both already done the hurting." I didn't respond right away. There was a wisdom in his words that didn't need commentary. "I'm proud of you," I finally said. He let out a shaky breath that sounded like release. "I didn't think we'd make it," he admitted. "And maybe we still won't, but we're trying, and that feels like something." Weeks turned into months, and slowly the tension faded. Not completely, trust doesn't grow back overnight, but enough for them to exist together without the constant echo of what happened. Their therapy sessions became less frequent. Their arguments became less sharp. Their laughter came back, not loudly, not all at once, but in small moments, like a light turning on in a room that had been dark for too long. One afternoon, my brother and I were sitting on his porch when he said something I didn't expect. "You know what she told me?" he said, staring out at the yard. "She said the confession she made that night, the one you heard, was the first honest moment she'd had with herself in months." I frowned. "But she didn't mean for anyone to hear it." "Exactly," he said. "That's why it was honest. There was something profoundly human in that. People often tell the truth only when they think no one is listening. And sometimes, accidentally, someone is." My brother looked at me, his expression softer than it had been in weeks. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't told me," he said. "I might still be living in a version of my marriage that wasn't real. I might still be believing something that wasn't true. I'm sorry it hurt you," I said. "It had to," he replied. "Sometimes pain is the only thing sharp enough to cut through a lie." That night after I left their house, I realized something important. The truth didn't belong to just one person. It belonged to all of us, to the one who whispered it, to the one who heard it, and to the one who needed it spoken out loud to begin healing. The final sign that they were really rebuilding came months later, when my brother told me they were renewing their vows. Not publicly, not with ceremony, but quietly, just the two of them, in their backyard under the tree where they first talked about marriage years ago. "I'm not promising perfection," he told her that day. "I'm promising honesty." And she replied, "I'm not promising I'll never make mistakes. I'm promising I'll never let you face them alone." When he told me that, I felt something shift inside me too. Not relief, not victory, something deeper, something that felt like closure. And in the end, I realized this story wasn't about betrayal or confession or the moment I overheard something I wasn't meant to hear. It was about what people choose to do after the truth explodes their lives. Some run from it, some bury it, some whisper it into the dark hoping no one hears, and some, like my brother, face it head on and rebuild everything from the ground up. So, am I the asshole for telling him what his wife confessed when she thought I was asleep? Maybe to some people, yes. Maybe they think I should have stayed quiet. Maybe they think I interfered. But when I look at them now, stronger, more honest, more real than they ever were, I know the answer. No, I'm not the villain. I was the one who refused to let a lie live longer than the truth. And that made all the difference.